to item 7. Actually, we want to do item 7 right now because there's some linkage here. So, Rob, come on up. Good. And for those who are in the chamber for the Downtown University project, you may like to stay a little bit just for the next 20 minutes or so for the Achieving the Vision piece. Rob, welcome. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We'll move straight into this item and try to make it as brief as possible. I know there's lots still on the agenda. Some of this will be obvious rehash from some of the conversations we've had previously. Some of it will be just reaffirmation for some of the things that we've been looking at here in the community for quite some time. As you've already mentioned, Mayor, Sarah and I have sat and thought some deep thoughts about the last 30 years of economic development over the last couple of weeks. We came up with the idea of maybe what we should talk about is achieving the vision. This is obviously a proposed title for our efforts. We're not tied to it. We're open to other ideas, but we really believe what we're talking about and what we'll talk about more today and going forward is really moving forward the ideas that we've been chatting about again for well over 30 years now. I only like to open with a couple of different quotes because I think it frames where we are as a community right now. We are moving forward in some very interesting new ideas, Nishi being one of those, that really isn't new. They're really actually reimagining of some of the things that we've been talking about for quite some time. But maybe most specifically is we, like very few communities throughout the U.S. and even globally, have a real opportunity around an economic development plan or program that's based in technology, that's based in research, that's based in innovation. So I wanted to make sure we framed our ideas here about imagination, et cetera, but really what we're talking about is how do we build on what we've already done. As I've mentioned already, we've had some previous assessments. A lot of groundwork has been laid. We've seen council goals clearly defined over the last few years specifically, but going back, again, well over a decade, conversations around economic development. And maybe more importantly, recently, this idea of real fiscal sustainability. How do we make sure that we have the money to provide the services that we'd like to see in this community and continue to do that? And then what we've really talked about a lot, and you heard Meg Arnold from SARTA talk about, is this idea of how do we work within the region, this idea of next economy, and in the staff report it lays out a number of those different pieces. Ironically, it's almost as if the next economy was written all about Davis sometimes. Every single one of those 5 major areas does exist and is working forward in Davis, and we're blessed. We're blessed to be at the forefront of a lot of these things. But let's talk about the innovation ecosystem. We know from a recent BAE study that we have over 3,000 job deficit here in Davis, and those aren't retail job deficit, those are high-paying, high-technology jobs, folks that have lots of skills. And from that, I think we've learned recently from a study that was done in Berkeley just a few months ago, that for every one of those high-paying, high-technology jobs, 5 other jobs exist in the system, other service jobs, other supporting jobs. So it's important for us to realize that we have a lot of opportunity, but we do have a deficit that we can and should probably address. We also want to focus on our local companies. What you'll see us talk about tonight really isn't about going out and trying to scatter requests for new companies to come to Davis, although we know that's happening and we're open to making sure that that opportunity exists. But we're really talking about how do we make sure we grow what we have. We also want to talk about making sure that our point of sale stays local as much as possible. But we're not talking about big box and we're not talking about large retail. And then maybe most importantly, it's these last 3 items that I think it really moves forward for what we're trying to accomplish. And this is this idea around innovation, building of an ecosystem, building of a park. and university engagement. And when I talk about university engagement, I don't mean university engaging the city, I mean us engaging them. What do we do? What are the programs that we put in place to support their efforts that are already ongoing? This is an innovation ecosystem framework that I politely modified and borrowed from an individual named John Sullipp. He is an angel investor here in the Sacramento region. And in fact, he's working very robustly to try to bring an ag innovation fund here to the city of Davis and the university, hopefully in the order of millions and maybe tens of millions. But he came up with this idea of really, if we're talking about an innovation ecosystem, it's about connectivity. It's about connectivity of all these different elements that pull together to make a true ecosystem, or more importantly, an economy. And maybe to map for you are 5 different focus areas that we'll quickly talk about. How do they fit into that innovation economy? How do they fit into that connectivity? Well, obviously, they fall throughout that same quadrants, but they bracket those quadrants. So it's important to recognize that what we're really talking about is expanding and moving forward with that same innovation ecosystem that's already being talked about broadly across this region. I won't go through every single bullet point here. This was in the staff report. Hopefully many of them made good sense. I would highlight just a few things, and you'll see here I've got some call-outs. We've talked a lot about entrepreneur support with our Davis Roots effort, our SARTA and Tech Davis, Innovate North State. Maybe most encouragingly, we've seen some progress forward on a wet lab incubator. We know that's a need, and we need to address that. So we are working forward with not only Pam Marone of Marone Bioinnovations, but also Capital Core Ventures, which out of the cannery project, we were able to see a $250,000 donation in that space. And then a lot of public-private partnerships. How do we bring other monies, other investments to the table in order to move forward with this area? One of the highlights there was obviously the Innovation Park. We don't have a proposal in hand right now. We have talked a couple of times about what proposals might be coming forward and when. Most specifically, we've talked about what's labeled here, the east and west sites, and we're hopeful to see something from one or maybe even both of those in the coming future. The east site seems to be of highest interest to some of our designated companies that have come forward, and folks like Tyler Schilling who have said, hey, we'd really like to stay and we'd like to grow here, and that's one of the places we'd like to be. But again, we have no proposal, so we really can't respond more than just say we encourage an opportunity here. But let's talk about research parks, and I want to make sure that this illustration is noted. It's only for illustration purposes. But I did go out and I checked the internet and I tried to find something that looks roughly like a 200-acre opportunity. This is one in the UK. You can see the source down at the bottom. And this is somewhere between 4 and 5 stories. I did purposefully blur this out so that we wouldn't get too tied to the image. But it meant to really demonstrate that what does a compact, sustainable opportunity look like that could really address some of the folks that we have locally. And then here's some metrics on what that looks like across the U.S. as far as averages, and this is from the Association of University Research Parks. I wanted to just quickly note to you 5 different places throughout California that have done research parks. They're of varying sizes, as you can see here, but they seem to bracket close to what the kind of opportunity is that we're looking for, and so these become informative to our future opportunity. But maybe this is the most important piece out of having a conversation about a research park, is that just in one sector that the university works on, sustainable manufacturing, we see over a $24 billion economy. $2.2 billion of additional investment coming out of the Obama administration through 2013 and beyond. And that there's been a 26% increase in growth since 2009. So these are those kind of companies that I've mentioned already, like Tyler Schilling with FMC Schilling Robotics. These are folks like DMG Mori. These are individuals and companies that are already working here in our town and want to grow and have been growing. And so you can see that just in one sector, there's an opportunity that's pretty broad. Our second focus area is this idea of this increased university engagement. And again, we're not looking to say the university should do things. We're saying we, the city, should be doing these things. And they're things like reaching out and making broader and better connections. Venture Catalyst has recently named a new individual that we've been talking with, Steve Lockett. and creating a lot of interconnectivity there about tech transfer, about opportunities for the university to grow new companies and startups. But there are other places in the university that we know of that are happening as well. Seed and Food Central with Francois Korn, the Big and Little Bang out of Graduate School of Management, and then the engineering tech centers over at the engineering school with both the student as well as the engineering-run incubator. To take something from Francois Korn and just quickly talk about what is the opportunity, he shows this slide at almost every single Seed Central event that he has, which is on a monthly basis. So you see all the little stars, and those are individual members of the California Seed Association. But in the yellow, 8 of the 10 largest of those groups are sitting here right within the Davis footprint, so close by in our region. And some of those obviously are names that you know. But maybe most excitingly is this is one of the other slides that Francois shows, and this is all the different companies that have had activities between 2010 and 2013. Purchases, expansions, growth opportunities, moving to the area. And I believe, yes, in fact, there's a representative from H.M. Klaus here tonight showing yet again their engagement in our community, so we welcome them. But these are the kind of things that we're talking about, again, just in one space. This is just in the seed and food production area. And you can see, obviously, the university has many other verticals that it's working from. So hopefully this is encouraging to what our opportunities look like. Our third focus area is just traditional economic development with a twist. What we're focusing on here, I think, from the city standpoint is how do we, the city, help facilitate? What we don't want to do is be redundant with what other people are doing in the area. So we have existing resources that come out of our downtown association with our Davis Chamber, our SAC Metro Chamber, and then from other places that you might not expect, things like the Workforce Investment Board, et cetera. These are things that we, through our work, are constantly trying to move forward and make businesses aware of, but they're opportunities. The other thing that's probably not well known, and we'll move forward more conversation in the future, is this idea of these statewide incentives, and I wanted to highlight them tonight because GoBiz has spent a dramatic amount of time trying to come up with ways to keep companies in California. These are things that are accessible throughout California, but they are good news stories for our local businesses, so we'll be using those for future opportunities. The fourth, and I think, again, this is just one of those obvious things, is that we need to continue to work from branding and marketing. This is obviously community outreach, et cetera, social media. But I would also highlight that we found recently, as you know, many a week I wind up doing an article for the Davis Vanguard and on occasion for the Enterprise. And those have been good, but what we found is that all of a sudden others are taking note. GovTech Magazine and GovTech.com have started picking up some of these articles and moving us forward and talking about Davis. And then just this week we found out that the Atlantic Monthly, partnered with GE, wants to do an article based on what we're doing here in Davis, specifically around this economic development program. That's good news. We're starting to be seen nationally as an innovation leader. Focus Area 5 is one that I think this council specifically, but Davis has often been engaged in, and this is this idea of regional leadership. It's not just going to the SAC Metro Chamber cap-to-cap trips. It's not just talking about our broad YOLO opportunities like rail realignment, but it's taking an active role in advocacy. It's taking an active role in the state legislative work with GoBiz and others. And maybe most recently, this idea of creating broader and better international connections through our Asian Pacific Chamber, the California Chongqing Trade and Commerce Agency, and then most specifically with the U.S. Commercial Services. All of those are great and good ideas, and it's yet again one more opportunity to say, hey, we're going to do something, or we are doing things. But what's really going to be important, I think, in this new evolution of where we're going is measuring that success. Here I've used an example of what the previous Betsy came up with as a really good example of how to report out what's going on within the economic development activity. And I realize it's very small and you can't blow it up. I do have the original PDF if you'd like it. But the intent here is just to demonstrate that we plan to both qualitatively and quantitatively talk to you as a council, but as the community as well, on a 6-month rotation about what we're up to and what those outcomes look like. So we plan to measure and we plan to be very specific in our success. Growing innovation businesses has always been one of those things that has been interesting to us because of the university, and I wanted to highlight that these things are happening right now in front of our face. Whether what we are engaged in, whether or not we actually work on this, this is happening. Most specifically, here's a couple of quick examples: Marrone Bioinnovations and Blue Oak Energy, and some growth examples. But there's plenty of others that are here in the community, and again, we list out a few more here, that are doing more investments, global opportunities, and they're growing in size. And not to be left behind, our startups are starting to really take root. Davis Roots has been a big effort of this city in partnership with folks from the university, both Andy Harganon as well as Anthony Costello. And the intent here is to really show that local jobs at the startup level not only are important and valuable, but they're growing rapidly. This is increased opportunities for folks in the downtown, and this is an increased opportunity for our students, not only to get internships, but then to have jobs once they come out of the UC. Some major activities that we've done in 2013, I don't want you to think that we weren't already working on these things, but we spent a fair amount of time over the last 11 months, Sarah and I, as we looked around at the different studies and assessments, doing work that really, I think, moved this idea forward. So we have some ground truthing already that this is, in fact, the right direction for us to go. And you can see some of these successes. And here's a couple of more. And they're all fall within that same ideas that we've been talking about. Maybe most specifically, though, is what are our next steps? Where do we think we'd like you as council to direct us, as well as the community as far as engagement? So we've had a fair amount of input on the plan, most of it being very positive, a few ideas on ways to increase the level of engagement. But we really think that this last two bullets, or these last two items at the bottom where we've circled, it's really about now leveraging and executing on these ideas, these assessments, these studies. So we purposely picked the words work program. It's not a plan, it's not a strategy, it's not an assessment. It truly is an execution. And we've talked about focus areas instead of goals or objectives or other things, because we want us to be very zeroed in on doing specific things that move the efforts forward here within the city. So what we're asking council to do tonight is to direct us to finalize this work program after getting both input from you as well as any other community input. Come back on March 25th. And then we'd like to come back every 6 months and use that same mechanism I showed earlier to come back and report out not only to you as council, but also get course corrections. And the way we want to look at this is a continuous process improvement opportunity. And so a hot start, and similar to innovation, we wind up getting out, getting it done. If we're going to fail, we fail fast, and we move on. With that, I'll take any questions.